Children running barefoot amid trash, makeshift shacks that seem to be held up only by sheer force of will, people getting by without bathrooms, without electricity, without almost anything. If I told you there was a place like this, you would probably imagine some forgotten corner of the planet where no one wants to set foot. But what if I told you that this place is right there, close to luxurious mansions, expensive hotels, and idyllic beaches frequented by millionaires? Hard to believe, right? But that's exactly how it is. Today, Bello Mundo will take you inside Khayelitsha, South Africa's largest slum, a huge and unlikely place that emerged from exclusion, grew up on the fly, and survives with a strength you can't even imagine. Get ready, because the story that's coming is one of those that will leave you speechless, not quite sure what to think. Number 1. Location. Our journey today begins in South Africa, a country that many people know because of its safaris, natural parks, Table Mountain, and beaches that look like they came out of a travel brochure. But South Africa is much more than tourism. Inside the country, we go straight to Cape Town, one of the largest cities in South Africa. It is full of tourist attractions and has a well-developed urban area, 5-star hotels, and wealthy people strolling around. However, just outside the city center, there is an area called Cape Flats. That is where Khayelitsha is located. The name may sound complicated, but it is well known to those who live there. Khayelitsha is now considered the largest slum in South Africa. The slum spreads over a huge area with several different parts. Some have brick houses, others are full of shacks made of zinc, wood, and whatever else is available. Most streets are unpaved, transportation is poor, and public infrastructure barely provides the basics. But it didn't just appear out of nowhere. The history of this slum began way back in the final years of apartheid. And to understand how it became the giant it is today, we need to go back in time a little. Number 2. The origins of apartheid and forced creation. To understand where Khayelitsha came from, we need to remember how apartheid worked in practice. It wasn't just a policy of blatant racism. It was an entire machine set up to separate people and to keep black people well away from the most valuable areas of cities. In Cape Town, it was no different. For decades, the government pushed black residents out of central neighborhoods. Those who lived in forbidden areas were simply removed. Their homes, history, neighborhoods, everything was left behind. In the early 1980s, things got worse. Areas like Crossroads, which had become a kind of urban camp, began to be forcibly dismantled. That's when the government decided to create a new and temporary housing solution on the outskirts of Cape Flats, a new space where these people would be thrown. The name chosen was Khayelitsha. It was far away, isolated, and until then practically empty, an open field of sand and sparse vegetation. And it was in this place that thousands of people began to arrive. The first families were forced to move there in 1983. In a short time, the number of residents exceeded 50,000, and it continued to grow. By the end of the decade, there were already more than 300,000 people living in the region. There was no infrastructure, no services, no planning, but people were arriving from all over. Because for black and poor people in South Africa at that time, Khayelitsha was one of the few options available. It was thus, on the basis of exclusion, that the slum began to take shape, first with makeshift shacks, then with entire areas being occupied, one after the other. And all this while the country was still living under a regime that gave no voice or space to the majority. What was supposed to be a temporary solution became permanent, and over time, it became huge. Number 3. Post-apartheid. With the end of apartheid in 1994, many people thought that the peripheral neighborhoods created during the regime would disappear, that people would return to urban centers, that geographical segregation would end along with racial laws. But that's not what happened. In practice, the effect was the opposite. Khayelitsha exploded. The official estimate in the 2011 census was that more than 400,000 people lived there. However, organizations such as the Social Justice Coalition point to much higher numbers. Some say 750,000. Others put Khayelitsha's population at over 1,200,000. Why did this happen? There are several reasons. The first is that the end of the laws did not erase decades of economic exclusion. Inequality remained. Many people were still unable to pay rent in formal neighborhoods, had no access to credit, and had nowhere to go. So they stayed where they were, or went where they already knew. The second reason is that democracy brought freedom of movement. People who were previously prohibited from moving to large cities could now try their luck. However, once they got there, the reality was harsh, and the peripheral neighborhoods created during the apartheid era, such as Khayelitsha, ended up becoming the destination. In fact, it is worth explaining. In South Africa, these areas where the majority of the black population was thrown during the regime became known as townships. They were neighborhoods planned by the government to keep blacks away from central areas. They were far from everything, with little or no infrastructure, and were created precisely to segregate. To this day, the term is used to refer to these large, low-income neighborhoods that grew up in this context. Today, in Cape Town alone, these neighborhoods are home to more than 2,400,000 people. There are more than 20 different areas, and Khayelitsha is the largest of them all. The third reason is that, even with the end of apartheid, there was no real plan to solve the housing problem. Promises of new homes, urbanization, and integration of the poorest areas with the rest of the city remained just words. In practice, these neighborhoods became permanent, and they grew like any other place where many people live. Khayelitsha became a city within a city. It has schools, shops, churches, a cultural center, a soccer team, and a community radio station. It is no longer a makeshift camp. It is the place where many people were born, grew up, got married, started businesses, and raised families. But even with all this, the feeling is that of always being on the outside, as if it were a separate piece of South Africa that we see in advertisements. A life parallel to official South Africa. Number 4. Infrastructure and living conditions. Living in Khayelitsha today means living in two different worlds at the same time. There is the part of the community that has organized itself, grown, created businesses, and built houses. And there is the part where everything is still improvised, where the basics are lacking and nothing seems to have been planned to last. Many people still live in shacks made of zinc, wood, and plastic. In many areas, there is no running water inside the houses. Residents have to walk up to 200 meters to fill a bucket at a communal water point. And yes, we are talking about the 21st century. The bathroom is also communal. In many cases, electricity is only available by connecting to a pole. Sewage? It runs down the middle of the street. But Khayelitsha is not all the same. There are older areas that now have brick houses, paved streets, schools, shops, and even a shopping center in the middle of the community. In these more formal areas, life is different. There are still problems, but at least there is some structure. The problem is that the informal part grows much faster than the formal part. While the government delivers one house, 2 new families arrive and build shacks wherever there is space. And since there is no planning, no control, and no sufficient oversight, the city grows sideways, forward, wherever it can. This creates a chaotic mix, where each piece is different from the next. And with this disorderly expansion comes another risk that has become routine there: fires. In the most crowded settlements, any lit candle, makeshift stove, or exposed wire can turn into a disaster. When the fire starts, there is no time. The shacks are stuck together. The flames spread in minutes. There is no fire department that can arrive in time. There are no fire hydrants. There are no police cars on the corner. The residents themselves are the ones who hold the fort. They use buckets, hoses, and whatever else they can find. Neighbors call neighbors, trying to save what little they have before it turns to ash. Number 5. Crime and violence. If there is no infrastructure, there is no security. And that, in this area, is part of everyday life. In fact, you can't talk about the community without touching on this point, because violence is part of everyday life for those who live there. And it's not just a feeling, it's reality. Recognized as one of the largest slums in the world, the region faces high rates of assault, aggression, and threats. And those who suffer the most are precisely the most vulnerable groups: women, young people, and children. But why does this happen? To begin with, where the state doesn't reach, crime fills the void. The neighborhood grew much faster than the public security structure could keep up with. In many areas, there are no police stations, no patrols, no constant presence. The situation got so out of control that the government even created a commission just to investigate what was going wrong. The goal was to understand why the police seemed inefficient and why the relationship between them and residents was completely broken. Another factor is unemployment. The lack of prospects affects a huge part of the population. Without income, without opportunities, without a clear direction, many people end up turning to illegal activities as a way to survive. And there's another point that few people mention. Violence is not spread evenly. About 75% of crimes occur in only 20% of the total area. In other words, there are specific areas where the danger is greater, and this is already known to those who live there. But that doesn't change the general feeling, because even if the problem is concentrated, the fear affects everyone, and that fear shapes everyday life. It changes schedules, it changes routes, it changes habits. There are streets that no one crosses alone. There are places where children don't play. There are people who already know that after a certain time, it's best not to go out. And the most striking thing is to see how this kind of caution has become part of everyday life. It is no longer seen as an exception. It's as if everyone has learned to live in a state of permanent alert. Number 6. Culture and resistance. A community does not live by hardship alone, and this one is proof of that. As much as the news always talks about the bad parts, those who know this neighborhood up close know that there is also life pulsing in a different way. There is art, there is tradition, there is pride. Khayelitsha is undoubtedly one of the most culturally rich places in South Africa, and much of that comes from the Xhosa influence. For those who have never heard of them, the Xhosa are one of the main ethnic groups in the country. They speak their own language, full of striking sounds, with clicks that are difficult to reproduce. But it's not just a language, it's a culture. It's dance, it's song, it's ceremony. It's a way of life. And most of the people who live in Khayelitsha are descendants of this people. What happens there is that all this heritage has been transformed into a new form of expression. It's what many call urban Xhosa culture. A mixture of traditional roots with city life, with influences from hip-hop, jazz, gospel music, graffiti, and spoken word poetry. There are dance groups that perform at festivals abroad. There are singers who left there and ended up on the international stage. There are visual artists, poets, storytellers. And there are many young people using all of this as a tool for identity. In fact, this idea of belonging is strong. People from there are proud to say they are from there. For a long time, saying you came from a neighborhood like this was a source of prejudice. Today, for many people, it has become a badge of honor, a culture. And along with culture came a unique way of doing business. Small businesses sprang up out of necessity, but many ended up becoming benchmarks. There are beauty salons that started in backyards. There are auto repair shops with few resources, but a lot of talent. There are restaurants serving traditional food. There is everything. It is called survival entrepreneurship, but over time it has become the engine of the local economy. People who did not wait for outside help and decided to make it work with what they had. Number 7. Current challenges. Today, Khayelitsha is at an impasse. On the one hand, the community continues to grow. People arrive all the time. Some come from rural areas within the country, others cross the border from other African countries. Everyone is looking for a better life in Cape Town. On the other hand, the infrastructure cannot keep up. The neighborhood grows, but public services do not grow at the same pace. The government is trying. There are low-income housing programs, projects to build new homes, improve schools, and expand access to water and sewage. But these improvements take time, and when they do get off the ground, they don't solve everything. Many residents even acknowledge that some things have changed, but they also say in no uncertain terms that violence remains high, that the poorest areas continue to be neglected, and that most people still do not feel any real improvement in their daily lives. This raises a difficult question. How can a place like this be improved without erasing what makes it unique? How can you transform without losing character? How can you urbanize without displacing people? How can you bring dignity without turning everything into a gated community that no longer has anything to do with those who have always lived there? There are some attempts underway. Public transportation projects to better connect the neighborhood to the city center, microcredit programs to support small businesses, community centers that offer courses and training. But the feeling for many people is that all this is still not enough, that the neighborhood continues to be treated as an exception, as if it were a part of the city that is there, but does not really belong. And that weighs heavily, because those who live there do not want to be tolerated. They want to be included. Number 8. The future. The question remains, where is this place going? The truth is that Khayelitsha is not going to disappear from the map. It is already too big, too strong, too relevant to be ignored. It has become part of Cape Town, whether people like it or not. It is there, present, with all its problems and all its potential. The question now is another. Will it continue to be a segregated neighborhood where only those who have no choice live? Or will it truly integrate into the city with access to the same rights, the same services, the same opportunities? Today, there are signs pointing in both directions. More houses are being built, public transportation is improving, and new schools are opening. But there are also new informal areas popping up, with people setting up shacks wherever they can, because they still have nowhere else to go. There are young people who proudly fly the neighborhood flag, who want to change everything from within. But there are also those who manage to leave and don't look back. What is certain is that Khayelitsha represents one of South Africa's greatest urban challenges since apartheid, because it's not just a large neighborhood, it's a symbol. And dealing with it is, ultimately, dealing with the past, with everything that has been done wrong for decades, and with everything that can still be done right. The future of this community will say a lot about the future of the entire country, because if Khayelitsha succeeds, it shows that integration is possible, that dignity does not have to be a privilege, and that those who came from the bottom can also have a place in the city center and at the center of the conversation. Did you already know this story? Had you heard of Khayelitsha before? Tell us what you think about this South African reality in the comments. And if you want to discover more invisible places like this one, subscribe to Bello Mundo. Every week we bring you stories from places that really exist, but that almost no one talks about. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.